Hi all, my name is Matt Grady. I'm a Sala alum and have been active at the school over the years. Previously taught at ESA, Camondo, and Versailles schools in Paris. I'm currently a design principal for the HDR West Coast offices, and I'm based in Vancouver. I'm a self-processed tower geek, seen here in the cantilevered glass boxes of the ledge on the 103rd floor of the Willis Tower in Chicago. But ironically, I have a bad case of vertigo and a serious fear of heights. I've spent my life living, studying, and practicing between North America and Europe, and have recently returned to Vancouver after many years living in Paris. I've been lucky enough to work with firms such as Jean Nouvel, Morphosis, Diamond Schmidt, among others, and have had the privilege of working on a number of ambitious tower projects in very different climates and contexts across Europe, North America, the Middle East, and Asia, some of which are shown here. These towers shown here, however, I wasn't involved with, but they might be good places to start to talk about the tower typology and the underpinnings of this studio. From the Tower of Babel on the left to the current super tall skyscrapers like the Burj Khalifa on the right, building higher has been a persistent pursuit for reasons both pragmatic and aspirational. They've acted as lightning rods for the ambitions of a culture, as stakes in the ground in the progress of technical prowess, as signposts marking in time and place the evolution of cities and of civilizations. Um, some towers, though, have taken their ambitions a little bit too far, technically and culturally. On the left, I don't need to introduce. On the right, the seminal destruction of the modernist hopes of the Pruitt-Igoe housing complex in St. Louis. This idea of stacking high has been part of the cultural imagination from the idea of verticalizing and repeating landscapes in this advertisement for high-rise living that we see from celestial real estate at the beginning of the century on the left to the efficiency and modernity of the inserted plug on the right. I couldn't help but notice and need to read the advertising copy, the celestial ad. Buy a cozy cottage in our steel constructed choice lots, less than a mile above Broadway, only 10 minutes by elevator. All the comforts of the country with none of the disadvantages. 10 minutes by elevator. Sign me up. We have witnessed how the hopes of Le Corbusier's Villa Radieuse on the left, a tabula rasa erasing what was there to the benefit of a repetition of towers in the park, has evolved to the repetition of solipsistic and unique separate worlds within a city grid, as discussed in Rem Koolhaas's Delirious New York. It's interesting also to juxtapose these two visions of towers in terms of Corb's ambition of opening the greatest number of people to space, light, greenery, and views, um, juxtaposed to the interest in this sort of surreal juxtaposition of uses on the right of the Downtown Athletic Club, profiled by Koolhaas in Delirious New York. We've witnessed the stratospheric rise of towers in a relatively short amount of time, from the historic birthplace of modern towers in Chicago on the left, where the first competitive races to build higher were basically unlocked by the innovations in steel construction, to the mutation into the extreme sport of the super tall, as evidenced in the recent constructions as seen on the right, showing 111 West 57th Street in New York on Central Park, which actually dwarfed the previous champion of 432 Park just to its left. And this competitive sport of higher building in steel has now been rebooted in wood, looking to clean up the sport, I guess. On the left, the 53-meter tall Brock Commons tall wood house at UBC was until recently the world's tallest wood building. until the 85-meter tall Nostjarnet Tower in Finland was built in 2019. With the increasing densification and urbanization of the world's populations, there is a growing need to densify intelligently. 2009 saw the tipping point of more than 50% of the world's population living in urban environments, and that number is growing each day. Towers have been both the ubiquitous marker and tool in this densification. What's interesting to note as well is, according to the UN, this particular typology accounts for one of the highest energy uses of any other. And given that 40% of the world's energy goes into the operation of buildings, the intelligent design of this type of typology can have a significant lever in ratcheting down this this difficult situation that we have in front of us. It's interesting to note also how fast the trend for towers has been accelerating. According to the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat, the CTBUH, 84% of the world's skyscrapers over 200 meters have been built in only the past 20 years. This tower typology has seldomly departed significantly from a uniformly and similar orthodoxy in the past decades. Despite significant progress in the science of building technology, systems, strategies, towers continue to be designed and built in prescribed and conventional norms, using standard strategies, systems, and products applied similarly to sites around the world without consideration of the site's unique contextual conditions and the warping of all these technologies in that favor. The hermetically sealed exterior envelopes often wrap all the orientations uniformly, ignorant of different solar exposures, views, urban contexts. Little generosity is given to the city and to the public further than the first floors at grade, and reserving the benefit of height, view, and air and prospect actually for those who have access to being high and who can afford to be high. Those tall buildings that do actually depart from the standards of the typical tower often do so with gestural expression as their goal. Their sculptural formalism and gimmickry abetted by the increasing ease of advanced computer modeling in order to justify their value to a city and to civilization in general. And we're witnessing a growing appetite from clients to differentiate their product from competitors with an increasingly iconic architecture. Tower design has swung violently from the traditional extruded tower toward ever more sculpturally expressive and daring forms into which the life of a building and its inhabitants must fit, and sometimes uncomfortably so. So this studio aims to expose students to the very specific set of parameters, constraints, and opportunities inherent in the tower typology in order to critically explore ways in which these factors can be manipulated, modified, and mutated towards towers that are more responsive, that are more reactive, and more adapted to their surrounding context. Of specific concern will be the influence of environmental factors and how the tower topology can respond responsibly to its site, its context, its climate, its program more meaningfully and more responsibly. And students will be encouraged to explore ways in which environmental forces can not only be controlled for and defended against, but be harnessed and channeled towards positively benefiting the building and its inhabitants, shaping the resultant morphology of the tower and responding directly to the characteristics of context that are so important. Attention will be paid to the ways in which the tower, as opposed to being a solipsistic and solitary entity, can become a more intimately connected, richly programmed vertical extension of the city and can intelligently respond to the evolving nature of the use patterns of its citizens. And this vertical extension of city life with its programmatic multiplicities, its vertical connections, its rich opportunities for overlapping desires will be of primary concern in the studio's explorations. So the studio structure will be as such. During the first 2 weeks, the first phase of the studio will pursue comprehensive precedent studies of notable tower projects that will expose students to the specific characteristics of the tower typology, as well as the ways in which towers might reflect the concept of responsiveness. And this phase will be punctuated by critically minded visits of notable Vancouver towers, as well as by talks by practitioners and specialists in the field of tower design. In the following 2 weeks, the second phase of the studio will involve a series of preliminary and open-ended speculative exercises on the discrete and specific inevitables of the tower typology. And since most of the successful towers are more often the fruit of efforts of and interactions between many people, as opposed to a solitary genius. The second phase will conclude with a collective exercise whereby the studio as a whole will engage in the collaborative design of a tower, and will riff off of the model of the cadavre esquis, the famous sequential mode of creation made famous by the surrealists. And for the final 7 weeks, the third phase of the studio will involve an in-depth design development of a mixed-use tower in a critically important location in Vancouver's downtown core. And students will develop a tall tower that emerges from and responds to hypercontextual cues and essential qualities of the site and context in a radical way.